Hi, I'm Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Creates. Go out and sketch a Palo Verde instructional video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to sketch a Palo Verde by applying what you learned in your step-by-step lesson. You can follow along today even if you don't have the Nature Sketch Creates step-by-step lesson. You can support this tiny business by clicking the like button, subscribe to its YouTube channel, and checking out future lessons at naturesketchcreate.com. First, make sure you have all the materials you need before you go out to sketch. You can sketch at a garden, park, your backyard, or even your kitchen table. Sketch a Palo Verde flower or something similar to a Palo Verde. Remember, this is just a sketch. The most important thing is to take your time observing nature and relaxing and practice sketching. Let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is, if you have a cutting, you can figure out how you want it arranged on your paper and what you want to include in your image. And I'm not going to take this flower off the stem because it'll probably wilt pretty fast afterwards. And if you're able to, you can just set your paper behind the flower while it's on the tree. If you have some low-lying flowers on a smaller tree, or you can take a cutting and do it at your house or in the backyard or whatever you're comfortable doing your sketch. And I also took a cutting of some of the leaves here, and then I just want to find out how I want it arranged on my page. So that's the first thing you want to do. Once you figure out what you want to paint, I'm going to paint some buds, maybe a couple, and then also this flower here, and also a few leaves. Now, do I want to do one leaf, 2 leaves, 4 leaves? I think I'll just do 2 leaves. And I'm going to go ahead and snip these off just to make it a little easier. So I'm just going to do 2 leaves today and probably arrange somewhat like that. And then I have to decide how I want my flower arranged on here, which is a little tricky because I don't want to take the flower off from the stem here. So you want to figure that arrangement out just by moving it around your page and seeing what you like. To make this a little easier, I'm going to go ahead and clip part of this off the stem so that I can see it better on my page. So I clipped the bottom part off, and I did that because I don't really want to have a side view. I want to have the forward facing view, kind of like in our final reference image. And I think I kind of like it right about like that. And I can use my kneaded eraser here to keep it propped up. Kneaded erasers are more than just a tool for erasing. They work great for propping up flowers. So I'll sketch it somewhat like that. I probably won't include all of these buds. I may just include, I think I might just include the flower, this bud, and this leaf. So now I just need to make sure I have it on the page the way I want it arranged. And these leaves actually seem to vary quite a bit on the plant itself. Some of them are a little larger and some of them are a little smaller. And these look like they're a little bit smaller than the ones I used for creating this step-by-step image. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of like with our step-by-step how I had you transfer the image, I'm going to kind of trace around the different parts so that I don't have to draw the whole thing. So this is transferring the image, same kind of thing. So I'm just going to draw a line here underneath the leaves, pin A, and then I'm going to draw the little leaves. These are such simple leaves, very easy to draw. Little ovals. And if you want, you can mention on the side here that you took a clipping if you did what I did and took a clipping off. Or if you actually left it on the tree, maybe it's not closing up like this. And now that kind of goes there. And I'm gonna try to keep this in a similar position so that I can redraw it and refer to it while I'm painting as well. The flower is going to be a little trickier because it's on this kneaded eraser, but I'm just going to do what I can to get the right size. And then I'm going to move it to the side. So my view will change a little bit, which means my drawing will change a little bit. And all of that is okay. This is just a sketch, just a representation, so it doesn't need to be exact. And my view of this flower would probably be a little bit different from your view as well. And this is where I need to start drawing it in. So figure out where I want to start on that. It's going to be a little different from the sizing here, but this is just to help me out. And maybe I'll just refer to these leaves to help me figure out where that's at, and this, and kind of think about this bud here to help me as well. Because this isn't actually all that helpful. It's going to be a bit bigger. A couple more leaves there. You need to erase, that's okay. Try not to do it too much. What you decide to include in here, and the sizing is up to you. You can do it at the size of the plant, or you can enlarge some things so that you can focus in on the details a little bit more. So this is your sketch. You get to decide how you want it to look on your page, what you want to include, the sizing, everything like that. And it's also helpful to make any notes on the side to let your future self and anyone else looking at the image know that you enlarged it, or whether it was a clipping, or where it was collected and what the date was, or anything else you might be thinking about, maybe your thoughts and feelings on the side. Once you have everything you want to add in your image drawn in, go ahead and add maybe those notes you want to make, or maybe you made them already while you were drawing. I have all the elements I want to have added in this drawing, so I'm going to add in just the common name this time. But I'm still going to include a name. And now I can move on to adding paint. So now I'm going to add some paint. I have the pre-mixed paints from my step-by-step, so I don't have to think about which colors to use. And like with my step-by-step, I'm going to do everything in about the same order. So first, I'm going to go ahead and paint in this really wet light, so a lot of water added to it in my palette to make it a lighter color, Palo Verde yellow. I dab it off on my towel and test it out on my little test paper here. Looks good. And dab it off after picking up a little bit more from my palette, and I'm just going to go ahead and apply it to the entire thing. And like using a marker or crayon, you just kind of fill it in. If you start to run low on color, just pick up a little bit more, dab it off on your towel, and continue. No reason to overthink it. This is just a sketch. Fill that color in from one side to the other. One thing you do want to make sure of is not to smudge your hand in it while it's wet. So since I'm right-handed, I like to start on the left side and kind of move down. One thing you want to make sure of is not to smudge it while it's wet. So I like to paint from the upper left side since I'm right-handed and then move down to the lower right side to avoid smudging it. And this dries really fast, so it's already dry. You can test that by just kind of dabbing it with your finger. So like with our step-by-step, I'm going to paint in the Palo Verde green. It's just this wetter, lighter color. I'm going to dab it off on my towel and test it out. Looks like the right color. And I'm going to add that to the bud. And I'm just going to refer to the bud in front of me as to where to place that. And my Palo Verde leaves are a little lighter than my reference Palo Verde, so I'm going to kind of take the same green color, but I'm going to add a little bit more pigment to it. Test it out on my paper. That looks about right, so I'm going to go ahead and add that. So I'm going to try to preserve that yellowish tint underneath on some of the leaves. So I'm not painting over the entire leaf, just kind of going in kind of a line motion around the edges, leaving a little bit. So doing kind of the left edge or the right edge, or some of them I'm doing the entire thing, outlining the inside or just drawing a line in it with the water brush. So just kind of preserving a little bit of that color. There's not a lot, but there's definitely more than my reference. I'm going to do the same on this side. And I got a little bit of paint smudged in there from my palette and my hand. And you can protect your image with a little bit of paper. It's always a good idea. But I'm fine with that smudge. It's imperfectly perfect. I could even put some paint spatters around the outside by kind of going like this with my brush. Does little paint spatters. You can see some coming up on there, and that might make it look a little bit more consistent if you want something that looks like it's more intentional. But this is just a sketch, and I think those little unintentional things make it great. Next, I'm going to add this Palo Verde orange. Adding a little bit more water to it. Testing it out on my test paper. Looks pretty good. And I'm just going to add that to the stigma and the stamen. And I saw the stigma was a little more apparent here. Just adding that in. And then right here is a little orangish. So referring to my reference image as to where to add that. And there's a little bit on the leaves too. And this is all dry. Make sure you let it dry before adding a new color, unless you want them to bleed together. And I'm just going to add it kind of sparingly throughout because it's a little bit burnt, looking a little rusty in some spots. I'm not getting real exact as to where. And even here on this bud. Then I clean off my brush and then pick up this dark yellow color. It has more pigment added to it, it's not as much water in my palette. And I dab it off on my towel. And I'm going to add it to, well, I'm going to test it first on my paper. And then pick up a little more, dab it on my towel. And then we're just going to add it to the flower to create kind of these
indentations and grooves or shadowed areas. So kind of the outer petals, a few of the grooves here, because there's a lot of little grooves in these flowers. Another way you can indicate these, in addition to the pen at the end, is with a little bit of pencil if you like. Just add some more pencil marks. They are very light, but you can see them in like little folds. Wrinkles in each petal. And then there's a little bit more on this bud as well. I'm going to clean off my brush. I'm going to use this Palo Verde red color. I'm going to check it on my paper, of course. Looks pretty good. And then I'm going to dab it on my towel. I'm going to make sure to roll the tip. Maybe pick up a little bit more. And then roll the tip again. That way I have a fine tip to create these little spots. These tiny little spots here. And they don't need to be exact, just representation of them. So they don't need to be super tiny, and they can blend together, and they don't have to be perfect at all. They have to be exactly the right size. And you can mention anything you think is off on the side in this white area too. This is just a practice, just you observing, and part of that might just be writing it down in words and referring back to your image. Cleaning off my brush, and then I'm going to take this green color, kind of more of a yellow green, and I think I want kind of something that's not super wet, not super dry, but kind of a medium amount of pigment added to that. Maybe a little more than that. Testing it out on my paper. That looks pretty good. And so this will just be added in these areas that are a little darker to create a little bit more contrast. So kind of on the tips here. This is kind of just not just one color. It has several variations of this green color, unlike my reference image, which is pretty much just one solid green. My reference plant is pretty much just one solid green. And this kind of in the shadowed areas. And the variation in light and dark colors helps this image to look a little more three-dimensional and pop off the page. So I'm just adding this in almost like a line motion, like drawing with a marker. Very transparent medium though. And there's a tiny bit of green right under here, so I'm going to add that in. Cleaning off my brush, and then I'm going to add in this rust color. And I'm just going to add that. I'm going to create a nice little fine tip on my brush. And then I'm going to add it to the anthers here, the end of these filaments, part of the stamen. And I'm just going to add just a little bit more, not being real exact. And now you can see how the stigma just doesn't really stick out. Just a little line there, easy to miss. And I'm going to clean off my brush, pick up a little bit more actually, because I think I would like to add a little bit on the filaments as well there. And I'm cleaning off my brush. I like the way this looks, and so I'm going to go ahead and let it dry and then move on to adding the ink. Going to add the ink. I'll start with the smallest micron I have, the 005 micron black. So it's a very tiny tip. And I'm going to use this to write in and redraw everything. I mean, you could use pencil for these lines. I'm just going to add them with this pen a little bit here and there. Depends on how apparent you want them to be and how much you want them to stand out. And I'm redefining some of these lines. My head has moved around a lot, so this looks different. So I'm gonna kind of helpful. It's kind of helpful to keep your head in one position while you're doing the sketch, so your angle and view doesn't change. I'm just going to dry on these just kind of sparingly. Little wrinkles. I'm not worrying too much about getting this exact, just getting a representation of this plant. So I'm not worrying too much about all the little details, just adding a few things in just to be a practice image, nothing that takes you too terribly long. And I'm referring to my image whenever needed, but I'm just basically redrawing the lines that I already have. Next, you can add some of the 01 black micron lines. It's just a slightly thicker line, and just kind of add these to things that are still kind of delicate, like the filaments and the entire area around. I'm not sure what's on the paper right there. It's not letting me draw. It's not wet. There we go. And maybe the outline of these petals here a little bit thicker, just to make them really stand out a little bit more. Maybe we want this stigma to stand out, so we'll draw that. And then I feel like most of the leaves are about the same. Maybe some of the grooves in the bud. And I can always go back and add some of these thinner lines if I want, but that looks pretty good right now. Now I'm going to add some 08 micron lines, and these are much thicker. And I'm going to add that in dark areas or any areas that look heavy, or where I want really nice separation, like between the petal and the pinnae here, those leaves. Maybe the bottom part of the anthers here, they're really small, just kind of blending together. And between the different petals, maybe just like one side, just to give them a little more separation. I think right at the top, just to give it some contrast from the bottom, to make it pop up a little bit more, look a little more three-dimensional. And then I'm going to outline parts of the leaves, or maybe the entire thing. Just one side of this area, and then the little leaflets have a little bit. This is kind of more delicate up here, where this tiny little stem is attaching it to the this stem. Maybe I won't draw those in. Maybe I'll just draw the leaflets in. Getting some contrast, only drawing one side of this main stem that they're attached to. Maybe just the lower side. A lot of times the shadow's more on the lower side, so if you leave the upper side a little thinner, it looks like there's more light hitting it, and it'll create more contrast. Since this is smaller, unlike in our step-by-step, I'm just going to put a few less lines to give it a little more contrast, make it pop up a little bit. So again, lining these lower stem lines, and then kind of the bottom part of the leaves where the shadow might be hitting, where there isn't any light hitting these little leaflets here. And I think I like the way that looks, so I'm going to add in the common name. I'm done. Don't forget to add some of your observations to the side, and remember, the step-by-step and the directions are just a guide to help you. You can paint in whatever way you would like to paint. So you don't have to put all the colors in that order. It's just a guide. Great job observing your world, and keep practicing. Don't forget to check out naturesketchcrate.com for future lesson crates. Click the like button and subscribe to this YouTube channel.